Hi everyone, I'm Nicole xstitch, and today I'm here with a Flosstube Extra tutorial for how to finish your cross stitches as a flat fold. And so to do this, you'll need your finished cross stitch piece, a piece of foam core cut to size, and so that can be the same size as your piece or enough so that there's a bit of white border around it. And then you'll need some pins. I have mine in this little stuffed E. coli that I use as a pin cushion. Some scissors of your choice. These are just going to be for cutting tape. And then the tape itself, which I use double-sided acid-free tape. This is good because it won't yellow your fabric over time. That's why acid-free is important. And so to get started here, we're going to align our cross stitch piece to the foam core so that it's centered properly. Now you can be as careful with this or as uncareful with this as you want. Some people obviously care more than others. But what I do is I use my pins to poke through the fabric and into the edge of the foam core to help me center the piece and then keep it in place. And so I'll kind of line up one edge and pin the corners and the center, and then I will see if that looks lined up when I pull the other side tight. Sorry, I'm a little bit off screen here, but I will pull it tight on the other side and attach that with pins as well, and then I'll kind of assess if it looks centered. I like to do this with the pins to start because it's really easy to modify it. If you think it's not quite centered how you like it, you can kind of pull it around a little bit. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. And you can see here that I noticed that the bottom is like a little bit farther away than the top. So I was kind of pulling the fabric to see if I could make that work or if I needed to repin it. And I decided to repin it because I didn't think it was even enough for me. So I kind of pulled the other side, the top, a little bit tighter and then repinned it in place. And then I'm adding pins to the other sides to also hold those in place. This makes it really easy to tape later because you don't have to worry about your fabric sliding around on your piece of foam core. And then I'm just checking that last side, pulling it tight so that there's no puckering in the fabric. Still making sure that everything is aligned to my liking. Again, you can be as careful with this as you want, or if it just matters to you that your piece is on something that allows it to stand up, you don't have to keep rearranging the pins and make it perfect. You can just do whatever works for you. So I'm adding the last couple pins here, and then once I have it all pinned in place, I'm going to move on to taping down the fabric onto the back of the piece of foam core to hold it in place. Now, a lot of people do prefer to lace pieces onto foam core or some other type of mounting board. This means that you use thread to secure the fabric in the back of the piece. I totally understand that, but I actually prefer tape because I find lacing to be very time consuming and it's not my favorite thing to do. So lately I've been using double-sided tape to do this instead. And so you can see what I'm doing here is I'm actually folding the corners in a different way than you might normally think to. So I'm folding that corner point down and then folding the sides in. And so to get this allows you to get those nice pointed corners without the fabric kind of sticking out the sides if you were to just like fold the edges straight in. And so I'm going to cut a piece of my double-sided tape to size to fit in that corner so that when I fold the corner in, it's holding that corner piece down. And I'm going to do that for each of the 4 corners and tack those down first before I tack down the larger lengths of fabric. And so this double-sided tape comes with one side of the adhesive exposed and the other side has a piece of paper that you have to remove. Sometimes the paper is a little bit hard to get off, so if you see me struggling, that's why. But I'll basically just stick the pieces down, remove the paper, and then I will fold the fabric in over it to secure it in place. And I do this while the fabric is already pinned to the foam core so that it's not sliding around, and I can make sure that it stays centered. So you can see I'm folding in those corners. It's kind of like wrapping a present. You want it to look nice on the front. So you want to make sure your corners are nicely tucked in and there's no extra fabric flapping around in the front. So once I have my corners stuck down, I'll check to make sure it looks straight again on the front, make sure I haven't moved anything around too much, and then I'll move on to sticking down those longer pieces of fabric. So again, I'm going to cut pieces of tape that are the length of the piece of fabric that I'm trying to stick down. So you can see me here just kind of folding over those pieces of fabric to see how big of pieces of tape I need to cut, and kind of messing with the corners to make sure I get like really nice folds. And so for this, I actually cut my piece of tape in half lengthwise so that I don't get extra adhesive sticking out from where the fabric is, because I don't want the back of this to be sticky in the end either, and I'm not going to put any finishing fabric on the back of it. So I'm testing out that piece of tape. It's good once it's cut in half. And then I'm sticking those down, peeling off the paper, and then I'll stick that fabric to it. Now there are definitely more kind of fancy flat fold techniques you can use that might also leave you with a finished looking back. I don't add any special finishing fabric to the back of mine. I just leave this fabric folded over because nobody sees the back of these. I usually am propping them up against books on a bookshelf, and it's really just that the reason I'm doing this flat fold finish is because I don't want to spend money on a fancy frame or anything, or maybe the piece doesn't fit into a standard size frame and I just need it to have a bit of stability so that I can lean it upright and it has, you know, something to hold it up. So that's why I do these foam core finishes. They're cheap, easy, and they work well for pieces that maybe just wouldn't fit very well in a frame, or that you don't need to look fancy to display. On top of that, you can also finish pieces on foam core like this and then stick the whole piece of foam core in the frame if the frame is kind of like tall enough or wide enough to do that. And I have used that to finish some pieces as well. It makes it nice and easy. So you can see I'm just doing the other longer sides and tacking those down. And as I do that, I'm making sure that those corner folds are nice and the way I want them to be. Sometimes if you're not careful about this, you can get kind of like wide and flat corners, and you kind of want them to be slightly more pointed. So you can see here that I'm messing with the fabric to try to get that to slightly more of a point. It's not perfect, but you'll want to kind of make sure that you like how that fabric looks at the corners. And then I'm going on to the other side. And what you'll notice now is that where I originally tacked down just the corners of the fabric, the extra fabric is kind of flapping up. And so here you can see I'm trying to kind of pinch together the corners so that they look a little pointier on the front. Again, I'm not going for perfect here, just kind of good enough. So I'm not too careful about this, but if you wanted yours to, you know, be a little bit more perfect, just spend a little bit more time there. And so now I can take out those pins since the fabric is nicely tacked down. And you can see that it's decently well centered, not perfect, but good enough for my intended goal. And then I'm going to flip it back over to the back side and make sure all those extra pieces of fabric that are layered on top of each other are nicely stuck down as well. I also wanted to mention that one of the reasons I really like this finishing method is because it doesn't take me very long to do it. That's why I prefer the tape. It only takes me about 10 to 15 minutes per piece to finish something like this. Okay, so back to those pieces of fabric that I was talking about. I will just add more small pieces of tape on top of the fabric that is stuck underneath. So you can see there's like 2 layers of fabric in those corners. I will just put a piece of tape underneath there so that I can stick those corners down. And I like to do this just so there aren't like loose edges for the fabric to be lifted at and possibly torn off of the tape they're stuck down with. And so this just makes everything a little bit more secure. I haven't tested how long this type of finishing lasts. I have heard from some people who have had finishes with this type of double-sided tape say that after, like decades, their finishes maybe start coming apart a little bit. For me, I am not really intending for these flat folds to be, perfect finishes that I have for, like as family heirlooms. They're kind of more of my smaller pieces that I just have as like little decorative items, and they might not be my style forever. And I always think, if worse comes to worse and the finishing method that I used doesn't hold up over time, I can always disassemble it and finish it another way. And while this double-sided tape is pretty strong, you can ultimately still kind of tear the fabric away from it if you really need to remove the piece. So I'm just finishing up these last couple corners. I'm really struggling with getting the paper off of the tape here. The best thing you can do is really stick the tape down to the fabric underneath it so that it doesn't slide around. That is pretty much all that I need to do to finish up my preferred way of flat folding. If you have any questions on this method or anything like that, please let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to give more details on anything that was unclear. And I'll also put a link to the tape that I'm using in this description box below. The foam core I just got from Michael's. It's pretty standard. And so here is the finished product, my flat fold of Lighthouse Day by Tiny Modernist. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you here next time. Bye-bye.